Board of Directors Midwifery Rules Advisory Committee meeting is convening at 9:10 a.m. on November 4th, 2025. This meeting is being held in person and through Zoom video conference. It's being recorded. The recording will be posted to the internet for public viewing. I will now call roll. Pauline is going to be absent. Desiree? Dr. Brewer? Amelia? Holly?
Present.
Janelle? Here. Janelle's in the room. Laura?
Present.
Michael Traeger, we never heard back from. Michelle?
Present.
Willa?
Present.
And Greg. Members, when you wish to speak, please state your first name for the record. Committee members are asked to not use the chat feature during meetings. Health Licensing Office asks that individuals attending through Zoom keep their phones muted and cameras off during the entire meeting or until they're given an opportunity to provide comment during the public and interested parties feedback period. Public comment is limited to matters listed on the meeting agenda or topics relevant to what the committee has statutory authority to regulate. If you wish to make a public comment, you're not in the room, email Chrissy Pickett at oha.oregon.gov and provide your first and last name. Everyone is asked to use appropriate language, manners, and protocols when conducting committee business. This meeting is now called to order. Okay. First, let me say thank you, everybody, for being willing to be on the committee and being nice about the timeline, because I know it's been a lengthy stretch of time that trying to get this planned, but I do appreciate everybody's patience. And Greg, who is stepping at the very last minute, literally the very last minute in the paramedic role, I appreciate you so much, Greg, for that. And Holly, who is serving as our subject matter expert from the qualification committee that met in 2020 and 21, maybe a little 22. So Holly will actually lead a lot of the curriculum or the competency part of the meeting because she was involved in that in Sorrentia's absence. She'll do that part, and then we will walk through the rules. So I want to do everybody introduce themselves so we know who everybody is. I'm Sammy Patnode. I'm policy analyst for the board of Midwifery, and I've been in Belfast for 30 years. October 1st was my 30th year, and I have had this board under me all that time. So it's been a wild ride. So Holly, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name's Holly Scholas. I live in Beaverton. I've been a midwife for 50 years. Right now I'm doing mostly consulting work and on more complicated situations. And yeah, I've been on the licensing board for many years. I was part of the original group that put together the original LD&D training. And I've taught a lot of LD&D through the years. So thank you.
First, you go on through. Laura, you want to go ahead and go?
Hi, I'm Laura Van Horn. I am a pharmacist and an herbalist. Not been involved with the boards before, but I thought it sounded interesting.
Amelia?
Hi, it's actually pronounced Emilia. I'm Emilia.
I'm sorry. All these years I've been calling you the other
I
name.
know.
Sorry.
I correct people every day of my life. It's fine. I am a licensed midwife in the Portland area, a small home birth practice, and I'm also the executive director of the Oregon Midwifery Council. I used to be an instructor at Birthing Way College of Midwifery. I did a little LD&D related stuff there. Yeah, that's it.
Dr. Brewer, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey y'all, I'm Jen Brewer. I'm a physician with Samaritan in Corvallis. I've been an OBGYN for, oh my gosh, 11 years, you guys. It just flies. And I have had the privilege of collaborating with out-of-hospital birth practitioners in the Staten area, Salem area, and Corvallis. So when I got word of this committee being a thing, I said, yeah, I'd like to be part of that.
We appreciate that. Janelle, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Janelle Vanderoga Rice. I'm a LDM at a birth center in Portland, Oregon. I am also a commissioner on the board of commissioners for CABC, which is the Commission for the Accreditation of Birth Centers. I do a sentinel event and complaint reviews for them.
Michelle?
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle. I'm a retail pharmacist in Klamath Falls, Oregon. I was drawn to this committee because I am a consumer of midwifery. I think I could bring an interesting perspective having rural pharmacy and midwifery experience.
Thank you. Willa?
Hi, y'all. I'm Willa Woodard Irvin. I'm a licensed midwife in Grants Pass. I own Rogue Birth Center. I am academic faculty and skills trainer for a MEEK school in Florida called CCSM. And I've been a midwife in Grants Pass anyway for 11 years.
And Greg, which I should say that Greg served on the qualification committee as well, so he'll be able to fill in areas with all. Greg, you want to introduce yourself? You're muted, Greg.
Okay, better. All right, I'm Greg Ramirez. I'm the emergency manager for Shriners Children's Hospital. I'm really grateful that you guys are including pre-hospital professionals in the discussion. I think it's going to benefit everybody, and I've enjoyed participating with the team and look forward to today's discussion.
And Derek is in the room. I'll have him introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Derek Foltz. I am a qualification analyst at the Health Licensing Office, and I've been here almost 7 years.
We've got Chrissy in the back.
Hi, I'm Chrissy. I'm the executive support assistant. I mainly support the director and the other two managers here, but in my downtime, I also recruit board members, so.
Okay. So I only scheduled one rules advisory committee in the hopes we only need one. But if we need another, we'll schedule it at the end of this week. We're hopeful. We'll see though. You never know. So we can jump right into the competency. And so it's on page 9. And did everybody get their packet last week? Okay. And I put the page numbers at the top so it's very clear to see. And I sent it, it was a second email, I believe I added the page numbers. So we're on page 9, and I'm gonna let Holly take it away. You're on mute, Holly.
So sorry about that, you guys. I need a bigger screen so I can divide it into 14 different sections. I don't have a bigger screen, so. When we first passed a licensure bill in Oregon in 1993, Legend Drugs and Devices was not part of that legislation. That was added around the year 2000. And it took a couple of years to get a program together to implement it. And that resulted in a couple of things. as part of that decision-making, which I was a part of at the time. One was the decision to allow people to continue to be licensed and giving a time frame within which they had to get the Legend Drugs and Devices training and have that added to their license. The idea being we didn't want to have a whole state full of licensed midwives who could not be licensed anymore until they got their Legend Drugs and Devices training, which was a program that was in the middle of being put together and implemented, right? And we were talking at the time about 60 licensed midwives, more or less. And the other thing about it was that we decided to have a relatively rigorous, compared to what a lot of people wanted at least, initial training requirement in all of the key areas. So that was pharmacology, meds by injection, suturing, shock IV, shock and IV, so that everybody would enter on the same level. Because at the time we had some midwives who had almost no training or no training in some of those things like IV, and other midwives who had a lot of experience in those things for various reasons. So everyone was required to do the initial training. And I myself personally was one of the people who went around the state and gave the training to people. And it was a really good experience, I think, for most people, and it brought everybody out on a level playing field. And then the idea was after that, every 2 years, you would have a renewal course, which was much shorter, that updated you on any of the newest things that were going on in the field and would retest for competency on the main skill areas, meds by injection, starting IV, and suturing. And have a written exam of some sort that covered the objectives, but it was not set out by the state. There was kind of a template, but it was not a state administered or state formatted exam. And so that happened for many, many years. At one point, and I should remember this, but I don't, we added, so at that point, the IVs were for the prevention and treatment of shock, and we were focusing on the AC site. Because in a shock or pre-shock situation, you want to get the fluids in, right? You're not going to mamby around with an alternative site. Then we added the GBS and prophylactic antibiotics to our formulary and to our scope. And that required additional required training, which everybody had to do within a certain time frame who was licensed again, but they could still be licensed without it up to a certain point. And then again, offered that through Birthing Way College, the college that I founded and was president of for 30 years, and other places to teach how to do that. And again, some people had experience doing it, and other people were like, whoa, clueless. And so that skill was then rotated into the renewal skills, right? Every 2 years you had to demonstrate. And it could be demonstrated on it didn't mandate that skill had to be on a live model. It could be on an IV arm, mannequin arm or something. So part of why we went to the trouble of doing this program in this way is because the way the law is in Oregon, and I was a big advocate for this along with many, many other people, was part of our legislative bottom lines, is that we wanted to have multiple avenues to become licensed. And even to this day, when the CPM is the required credential to have in order to be licensed in Oregon, the CPM itself has multiple avenues for credentialing. You can go to a MEEC accredited school. You could go through the competency-based portfolio program. You can do reciprocity because you have another credential. Like, it is very flexible. And so without any mandatory specific training at an accredited school, because there's a diversity of different kinds of backgrounds, we thought it was important to make sure that everybody had this minimal training. And at the time, we were one of the very first states to have a formulary for direct entry midwives. So a lot of other states, even if you were licensed, you didn't have that mandatory training. And even NARM itself did not require people to have IV training. You had to have meds by injection. And for a long time, you didn't even have to have suturing, but suturing eventually ended up in the scope. Now, suturing, meds by injection, and IV is all required training for the CPM credential, the Certified Professional Midwife credential, and the certification body for those of you who aren't midwives is NARM, North American Registry of Midwives. So NARM is the certification agency. The credential is the CPM. MEAC, MEAC, is the accrediting agency for midwifery schools, but you are not required to attend a MEAC accredited school to become certified. So that is rare in the world of worlds. And partly that's because there have been midwives for a long, long time, very diverse, and trying to get everybody all credentialed up to the same level without requiring additional expensive training. And as someone who ran a MEAC accredited school for many years, I'll tell you it's very expensive to run an accredited college. So, and it makes it expensive for our students. So we decided as a profession nationally that what we cared about was not the credential of where you got your training, but that you had the competency and that it was assessed. So midwifery, direct entry midwifery, which means not certified nurse midwifery, but everything else, is competency-based credentialing. So with that background in mind, first of all, any questions about any of that? Because that's like the super quick tour of midwifery history, and especially in Oregon. So there was a lot of skepticism when we first got the formulary, and I myself remember sitting and talking with the head of the pharmacy board, the head of the Oregon Medical Association in the cafeteria up at the Capitol, thinking that we were going to kill everybody all the time. They were really concerned about some of the drugs we were allowed to use at the time, especially epinephrine and other things. And it turns out that we haven't killed anybody with the drugs. So, phew, relief there. I really didn't think we would, but, and so that's a happy note to move forward on. So what has happened in the interim? So that's been 25 years-ish since the original formulary was idea was put together and passed. What's happened is that instead of us being like the third state that had a formulary, there are now 28 states that have licensure and allow midwives to suture, give meds by injection, and start IVs with a limited formulary. None of, maybe one or two have prescriptive authority, so it's just professional use, including in Oregon. And it's a limited formulary related to the work that we do. And that's true in many, many states, that it's a limited formulary based on what we do. In fact, it's pretty much all of them. So, which means that and you probably noticed that a lot of people move from the place they were born and move to other places to live and work. Shock. And so we've had people coming in from out of state, wanting to get licensed, who are already credentialed in another state, still needing under not rule, but under legislative mandate, under our statute, to have the 40+ hours of training in legend drugs and devices. And there were fewer and fewer of them. So unlike when we first started the program, when there were 60+ people who needed it, now there were 1 or 2 people a year who needed it. And when Birthing Way closed, thank you, COVID and the economy, then there was not even a place easily available. We have one person in the state who offers courses occasionally. Right now, nothing is really available. And then we have, I've been part of Hive, which is an online continuing education, and we have some courses there that would meet the requirements. So, but it's an expense, it's a lot of time, it's a problem. Plus, at this point, allowing people to be licensed for a year without having the legend drugs and devices credential put on their license as part of their license is confusing, because consumers hire a midwife who's licensed thinking she can start an IV, and she cannot start an IV because she doesn't have that on her credential. So several years ago, I shudder to think how many years ago. Don't use the number, Sammy, because it will make us depressed. Many, once upon a time, let's put it that way. Once upon a time, there was a hearing, and at that hearing, or meeting, or whatever the heck it was, to me, hearings and meetings are basically the same thing. There were several of us, including the people who at the time were doing some renewal teaching, and myself and Silka Akerson, who was in leadership at the time at Oregon Midwifery Council. A bunch of us, like 4 or 5 of us, each testified, this system must change. It is not a good system. It's not helping anyone really at this point. And the suggestion was that we move to a totally competency-based approach for legend drugs and devices. So what you see in front of you is the work of the advisory committee, which Greg was a part of. Shout out to Greg, made a lot of great contributions, and several other people who were on that work group, and myself, both as a member, but later as a advisor, to come up with the standard competencies and the skills competencies so that an individual would be able to receive this information that's in front of you, the standard competencies and the skills examination details, know what's expected of them, take a written exam, which I'll talk about in just a second, take the 3 skills exams, wherever they may be. That wouldn't even have to be in Oregon. It just has to be an approved proctor to give the skills exam. And then they would take, and this is subject to change, but the proposal is take the written exam online and at a reasonable cost and very accessible. That was a priority, was make it very accessible. So the rural midwife, the midwife who has a busy practice would be able to access this. And that competency, those competency assessing tools would be required before you become licensed and when you renew your license. Not every year. We're proposing every 3 years. Could be every 2 years. I don't think it needs to be every year, personally. But but it does need to be not every 10 years or even every 5 years, because community-based midwives, direct entry midwives doing home births and birth center births in general, I'm sure there's people out there that this is not true for, but there's 2 extremes. The person who never uses these skills except maybe injection, and the person who uses them fairly frequently. And the median, I can tell you from educating midwives now for a very long time, is once in a while they do the things. Once in a while they suture. Every once in a blue moon, they start an IV. They give meds a little more often because of vitamin K, Pitocin, to prevent hemorrhage, etc. But especially the IV is not done very often. And having offered renewal for a long time, people needed the reminders. They needed the assessment regularly. From what I saw, every 3 years would be acceptable and make it a little more accessible, but 2 or 3 years is kind of where that those assessments should be. So what we're proposing is a system that you're going to be looking at and are looking at and have looked at, where the standard competencies are what people are expected to know. From those standard competencies, I created a written exam with feedback, which follows the OHLO rules, which are very different so it's very different than the tests that I put together, which were a different kind of thing. So no listing questions, no essay questions, no true-false questions, no questions, unlike our national certification exam, where some of the answers are partially correct and you want to pick the best answer out of the pile of answers. In this test, it's all multiple choice. It's all topics covered by the standard competencies, so there's no tricksy, and only one answer is completely correct. And the other answers are not even really partially correct. So if you know this material, you should be able to pass this exam. It has a lot of questions that are, what is the dosage for this drug? What are the side effects of that drug? What is the correct, that kind of thing that you would need to know in order to use them appropriately. And there was something else about this. Anyway, it'll come to me. So that written exam, oh, I remember what it was. So the committee that worked on this looked at the questions and looked at the competencies and decided there's a core group of questions that will show up on every single written exam. Not in the same order, but they are considered essential questions that everybody must get on their test. And then there's a bank of additional questions which will rotate through a portion of them, not all of them. Some of them will be added to each individual's exam and rotated through. So no one exam will be the same as another exam, and the numbering will be different. This is what computers allow us to do. Thank you, computer gods. So some core questions, and then a bank of questions, some of which will be on each individual test. So that's the written competency written exam. And then the skills exam is templated out as well so that the proctor knows exactly what needs to be tested and exactly what needs to be done correctly. It's written down everything from gathering the supplies all the way to the end for each of the exams. And anyone who meets the requirements that we have set up for proctors as a proposal, again, needs to be approved by all the approvers, will be able to proctor any given exam. Not every profession is included as approved to proctor. As an example, paramedics are approved for IVs and for injections, but not for suturing, because our understanding is that suturing is not part of the scope of practice of the average paramedic. CPMs, Oregon licensed midwives, MDs, DOs, CNMs are pre-proctors for all of the skills exam, and then RNs are for some, paramedics are for, it just depends. And we have another category, which is for people who are licensed out of state, people like me who are retired but still doing a lot of teaching and, able to administer exams in my sleep. And or anyone who thinks that they're qualified to proctor an exam can provide their rationale, their credentials, for the board or OHLO staff, depending on how it ends up, to approve that person also as a proctor. So a given student might have more than one proctor for different exams. They may have a medic for 2 of the exams and a CPM for the 3rd, or they may have an RN, or, just depends on where they are and what they need, when they need it, who's available, that kind of stuff. The state will charge, I believe it's $50 as proposed for taking the written exam. No charge for taking the skills exam unless that's arranged between the proctor and the student themselves. So some will choose to not charge and some will choose to charge, and that's between them, not our deal. So at any point, you get your training however you get it. We don't care. Officially, I mean, we care. But if you can pass the written and the 3 skills exams, you're competent to be a licensed midwife in Oregon who gives legend drugs and devices. And that is the idea behind this. So when we talk about the rule making, let me mention one other thing. At the end of the skills exam packet is a form that is for the preceptors, depending on how many they are, to complete, demonstrate, authorizing or certifying that the student has passed that exam. And that is sent, the form is sent to OHLO. And then the original paperwork at this point, the proposal is that the proctor has to keep that for 5 years in case it needs to be reviewed or something comes up. OHLO does not need 47,000 scans of, many pages of skills exams. And we have proposed an application for proctors to fill out to request being a proctor. There's no charge to request to be a proctor. And it has, the first page is the one that is kind of unique. And then the other 2 pages are blah, 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 government, blah, 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 Oregon health licensing, blah, blah, blah. So I had nothing to do with those last 2 pages, believe me. But we did make some changes from other applications that other boards under OHLO have and made it uniquely appropriate for this program. So what you have is the standard competencies, the skills exam, the form for the proctors to fill out, and then the rules. And so the rules are what were put together by Sammy and Derek mostly, with me reviewing and advising and going, no, don't do that, because that's bad. That will change the current OARs, Oregon Administrative Rules, in order to allow this program to be implemented. So some highlights of that, and we'll come back to this, but just so you know, we took out anything referring to the old way we used to do things with the 40 hours initial and then the renewal and blah, blah, blah. And we slid in the new way of doing things, including that you now have to have this done and passed prior to becoming licensed in Oregon now, once this is implemented. And so that's new. And also reducing the number of continuing education hours that a renewing licensee must have in pharmacology, basically, in legend, drugs, and devices topics from 5 hours to 1 hour. Now, in a perfect world, we might have gotten rid of that continuing education requirement completely. But unfortunately, when that change was made to get rid of renewal training in the interim, and this happened around the time of COVID, to get rid of the renewal training and retesting, and instead put in 5 hours of continuing education on LD&D topics that are listed. And that was put into statute. What it says is that you must have some, it doesn't say a number of hours, it doesn't say the topics, but LD&D specific continuing education is set forth by the Oregon Health Licensing Agency and the board and all the blah, blah, blah. So there's no way we could eliminate at least a 1 hour requirement because it's in statute, unless we change the statute, and changing the statute requires going to the legislature. And if you aren't familiar with that, that's not something you want to do on a whim in order to remove that. So 1 hour, also continuing education as it's written in our rules can include reading articles and stuff like that. So you can read an article for 1 hour on the latest in TXA or whatever, and you're good. So again, accessible, not expensive, easy to do. For that 1 hour. There's obviously lots of other continuing education requirements, but so fine tuning, and most of the rules were not changed at all. Risk assessment wasn't changed, practice standards wasn't changed. It's only the LD&D stuff that was really adjusted to accommodate this new program. So I also brought, in case people have questions, what some of the test questions are or are like, but we decided, unless this is something the RAC really needs, and it's this big. So I don't think you want it, but maybe if you do, I don't know. That's an OHLO thing. But if you have questions, like give me an example of a question on the written test, I'm prepared to do that for you, needs be. All right, any questions? So many questions. What do you think of the proposal? Anybody have feedback on thumbs up, meh, question about that? Sounds weird. The whole concept of the switch we're making from butt and chair training. The biggest change, well, it's both of them. The initial, getting rid of the initial training requirements, specifications is big. Requiring renewing midwives to go back to being tested every 3 years is also big. And I've talked to a lot of midwives about this, by which I mean 7. For me, that's a lot. Not hundreds. We don't have hundreds in Oregon, first of all. And the people that I've talked to in general said, who were already licensed, were like, yeah, that's kind of a drag. But the truth is, we really probably should be being reassessed on our competency on this every 3 years, because we practice very independently, not embedded in a hospital or an emergency medicine system, doing our things. And when we need these skills, we need them to be done correctly right now. And so every 3 years doesn't seem like an onerous burden to have to demonstrate your competency in these particular skills, which are freaking life savings, some of them. So all of them, well, suturing less so, but depending on the scenario, even suturing can be life-saving. All right. What do you think? Anything I left out there, Sammy?
No. Do you guys want to walk through the competencies?
Did people have a chance to look at them ahead of time? I know they went out like last week, so there wasn't a ton of time.
I do have 2 questions on the competencies.
Awesome.
I'm not sure if this one is referring specifically to a test question, but competency 1.10, the last sentence of it says antagonist drugs bind to the receptors in the brain and block the binding of opioids. So I'm wondering, does a test question talk about opioids be an antagonist, or because antagonists can bind to receptors elsewhere in the body?
Right.
And
We don't ask about opioids on the test.
Okay.
Because that's not in our scope. And you're right, that should have said something like, for example.
Okay. And the other one I think is just a typo is competency 1.17. Explain the material. And then the first bullet point on the next page says maternal.
Oh, yeah, that would be wrong.
So those are just the 2 things I noticed. But I thought that the competencies were I thought the rest of them look great.
Thank you for catching that. Yeah, that was definitely supposed to be maternal. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that you've read it 17 times and your eyes just go right over it, and spell check just was like, yeah, that sounds great. No problem. And even I, for a minute, when you first said it, was like, material. I wonder what we meant by that. Okay, thank you so much, Michelle. That was super helpful.
No problem. It's helpful to have pharmacists because we're always looking for typos and errors.
This is why you guys are here. We need you. I know Greg has already seen these puppies like 4 times, so he probably doesn't have a whole lot to add. Anybody else, though?
Hey, it's Jen Brewer.
Hey, Jen.
Just practical question. That was a pretty thick little book you held up. How long does it typically take people to complete that exam?
Well, we've never given it before. This is all
Well,
of the
what
questions.
estimated?
This is all of the questions, including the banked questions. So nobody would be taking all of these questions at the same time.
Gotcha.
And I believe we determined, Sammy, remind me, that the test would have 100 questions, 80 questions. Do you have that breakdown?
So. See here. Each written exam is a total of 59 questions. Does that sound right? 59?
59 required plus another 20 from the bank, right? Or 21.
And I'm not really sure.
Something like that. So it's going to be about 80 questions. So we're hoping, against hope, that will take an hour to an hour and a half at the most.
Mhm.
I mean, I took it pretty fast, but you know,
Yep.
not a good. I mean, if as always, because of the kind of test it is, where one answer is clearly correct and the others are clearly, if you know it, are not correct, it shouldn't take people a whole lot longer than just what it takes to read the questions. Um, so it's one question with 4 potential answers. So, and this is a big, thick thing, but it's one question per page. So
Oh, understood.
it looks worse than it is. But it was very dramatic, don't you think?
Yes, right.
Very dramatic. Thank you. Great question.
Yes, and that will be something that you guys can make recommendations on today, if you have recommendations on how long you think, like a minute question, or, we probably will put something like that in the rule, just in case it needs to fluctuate, but it would go on like the, written exam materials for people to study from. But that's on the agenda. Any, anything missing from the competencies? I mean, let me just take you a little bit back. So over time, we make rules over time, right? And over time, attorneys look at rules and how we do things. And when you start adopting full documents into rules, then you need a rules advisory committee to review the full document, even though another committee created the full document. So in a perfect world, we would have had the qualification committee and rules committee be married and meet together. Well, the perfect world didn't work out. So, but you guys are really looking at a document that another committee really flushed out. And you're just looking at it because we're going to, when we get down to farther in the agenda, you'll see where I reference this document in the rule. And that's why you guys look at it, kind of put your stamp of approval on it to make the recommendation to the board. And the board may make changes, may not. They've seen it already. I don't anticipate them making very many changes, but I'll show them any changes that you guys recommend. Is that helpful? Any questions? We can move right on along.
I have one more on the needle length for IM injections. There's only 1 1/2 inch needle. This is competency 2.4. Is 1 inch, can 1 inch also be added to that, or is
For an
that,
adult,
yes?
we can. We're looking at pregnant people for the meds that we're using. These are all meds for postpartum hemorrhage. And we
Okay.
want to make sure it's an IM injection for sure, not in any way subcute. So I hesitate to do that in case somebody uses a 1 inch needle because that's what they have instead of 1 1/2, and we end up with not nicely located in the muscle. On the other hand, we definitely don't want to be doing a bone marrow transfer or anything. So that would be a little overkill.
I was wondering if it was practice specific. I we're usually just ordering 1 inch needles for people for IM, but I understand why your the 1 1/2 is helpful now. Thank
That's
you.
what we've always used and always taught. And if you have a super skinny, very scary that you're super worried about person that somehow you're allowing to give birth out of hospital, remember again, we risk assess a lot and refer people to hospital if we're concerned. Then the assumption would, we could definitely add, I mean, we could add something that says something like 1 1/2 inch for average or heavier client, 1 inch for, people with no adipose tissue or something. But what do other people think? What do other midwives and docs and pharmacists think? Emilia, what do you think?
I mean, I think 1.5 inch covers most everybody. Like really, I don't think a 1.5 would ever be too long for an adult in their thigh. So seems fine. Also 1 inch is probably fine. So I don't have a strong feeling. I think feels like it's too complicated to add to start talking about the size of someone's body when we're talking about the needle length in this setting. So yeah. I guess the question would be like if someone administered a drug with a 1 inch needle and then the hemorrhage wasn't managed, could
Right.
that they used a 1 inch needle be like brought back? That seems like a pretty like deep dive into an investigative process, but like could the fact that they used a 1 inch needle be cause for not good management? That seems extreme to me, but that would be the reason to that would be a reason to include like a variety of options.
Hey, it's Jen again.
Hey,
We're
Jen.
supposed to say our name again, right? When we say
I
stuff.
love that you're doing that.
Thank you. I try to pay attention to the rules. I would offer that if we're talking gluteus or thigh, 1.5 is enough. Deltoid, I would get a little 1 inch, I think might be a reasonable option, but I would assume that out of hospital, we're going leg or bottom. So probably fine to leave it at 1.5.
Deltoid is obviously an injection site that can be used. And you're right, if people are using it, I don't think I've ever talked to a single midwife who's ever used the deltoid for postpartum hemorrhage
Totally.
medications. So,
Totally.
but we could add,
So maybe there was a bit of an assumption in there that the
right,
1.5 is for the bigger muscles. So you could specify 1.5 inch for thigh or glute.
yeah, and then 1 inch or just 1 inch for deltoid is
Yeah,
acceptable,
Sure.
something like that.
this
Yeah,
is
Yeah.
this is Emily, and I would say the only time I hear of people using a deltoid is if they can't get someone out of a birth tub and they can't
right,
access the lower part of their body. So that
right.
makes a lot of sense to me to like for the deltoid, but for
Yeah.
that makes sense.
That sounds great. I made a note. Great. Oh, I'm so glad you guys brought that up. That's so perfect. We tried to think of every single thing, but even with the group mind, every single thing is a high bar. Anything else? And Sammy, did you send them the skills exam template as well? Great. I thought so. How about that little puppy? Good times. We did adjust Greg on the IV catheter set for the needle and catheter. You may have noticed we put 16, 18, or 20 gauge for the shock instead of earlier, I think we had 14, 16, and 18 because as I looked over the literature and training materials for medics and ER and etc., seemed like we're moving towards acceptance of larger gauge catheters in the emergency setting. So does that still seem appropriate to you, or should we include smaller gauge IV catheters should we allow for smaller, like a 22? Now, this is for the AC. For the non-IC sites, we're saying 18, 20, or 22, which is again getting them a little higher.
We always try and place as big an IV as possible, but I
Exactly.
always say I'm going to get more. I'll get more fluid through the 20 that I hit than the 18 you miss.
That's right.
So I'm fine with 16, 18, and 20.
Okay. Great. And I completely agree with that. If it's in the vein, you're already getting more than if it wasn't in the vein. So that was one of the main changes that was made since we last met, the advisory committee last met, which was quite a while ago now, like a year and a half or so, 2 years ago. So the rest of that is pretty much the same. as what you saw, Greg. Well, if there are no other thoughts, and of course, people might have some stuff later, I'm going to assume that the committee and I did a fabulous job.
Enough job.
That you are in awe of what we produced because it is so awesome. And obviously, if if you notice something as we're going through the rules or at any point, but I think Sammy made a really important point, which is these things, as they will be amended with these changes that we've talked about, will be referenced in the rules and will be what people are held to, and also what the exams are based on. So if you do notice some crazy thing, that you think is life-threatening between now and when this thing gets finalized, you should definitely let Sammy know so that we can catch whatever horrible thing it is. Remembering again that this is awesome. Okay, so.
This
You
is Willa.
want-
Can I just make a real quick comment? Sorry.
Of course, Willa.
I just want to say, being down here in District 7 by ourselves in Southern Oregon, I am so excited and really appreciative of how organized this is, of the reality of us not having to track down and move all of my staff, hours north to try to figure out where the nearest trainer is. Obviously, Holly, you've trained online with us from Southern Oregon before. I just think that having this in black and white and so organized and detailed kind of makes my nerdy self so happy and so proud of all the work that y'all have done. So I just want to say thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That underscores another thing, which is that these exams have to be, the skills exams have to be in real time. And the proctor is responsible for the safety of the setting, but they do not have to be in real life. They don't have to be in person proctoring. So the proctoring can happen and from a distance. And because I do that a lot for suturing and for meds by injection, and we're working on bringing, we filmed and we're finalizing the IV training as well. I can tell you that it is possible to do it with the correct stuff. So I think that adds to the flexibility that, that these things can be assessed appropriately from a distance in real time. And the other requirement is that each student is being assessed one-on-one. You can't be assessing more than one student for their skills at a time, so that you're having to really focus on what they're doing. I can tell you the way that I do it is with a phone holder that gets very close and a computer screen that allows me to see what's happening in the larger view, so I can tell what she's reaching for and what she's doing outside of just the immediate field where she's working. And then we use different kinds of artificial, like there's this really cool thing that allows for you to do the sterile water injection practice that we use for testing that, and different models that you can use. Not going to be practicing your suturing on a human being at that time. So, there are ways to do it that it's safe and is thorough. One of the questions that we had was and what we're recommending is no, but the answer could be yes. Are we requiring that this testing, especially for IVs, be done on a live model at any point? And our recommendation is no, because that adds an element of potential risk for OHLO, for one thing. And what we're after is, do you have the correct steps, the correct technique? And as we all know, if you've started an IV, some people are never, ever, ever going to have an IV in even their AC because their veins are just what they are, and that's bad for them. And other people, you could have a blindfold on and hit a vein as long as you knew roughly where their arm was. So the ability to, however, knowing the steps, first you do this, then you provide the traction, then you check the bevel, then you do, that's what we can easily check on a mannequin arm, right? So do people have, so that's what the recommendation is at this time, is that obviously for the other two, we have never required live starts. In the past, we required a history of a certain number of live IV starts, but now we're not requiring that anymore. So what are people's thoughts specifically for IV on requiring live starts as part of the testing?
I think what you're proposing is brilliant. And there are also, I just got back from skills with with the college students, and they had some new IV trainers that I had never seen. And it was basically a silicone oval that had an actual tube in it. And once they sunk the IV, you could then use a sterile saline flush, and if it shot out the other end, then you knew you were actually in the vein. I was like, these are the coolest things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So you could tell even on a fake arm that's on your arm, on that fake little egg you strap on your arm. So, I mean, you can do the same exact thing with very little risk of hurting anyone else.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I wish they'd had those when the college was open, because boy, it's dicey when you're having people do live starts.
Yes.
It's Jen again.
Hey, Jen.
The assumption is that they've had some live start training in their
Exactly.
training,
That's
right?
right.
So they've done at least one live start, because I know that first time you put it in, you get that flash of blood and you're like, what? So what do I do now? Right. So I guess that's the stipulation. As long as you have had live starts before this exam, that would be my thought.
Writing that down. So we would need, what would that look like? How would we
I mean,
require them to document that?
that not knowing probably the background of all the different the ways you gave a very good summary, but all of the different ways that people come to this particular credentialing crossroads. I don't know. We
Is
just take their
there,
word for it. It's just like honor system.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like, how do you
Right.
demonstrate that? Yeah, that's
Sure.
the problem.
Sure.
So I agree. I mean, the more the better.
Yeah, I didn't see it, but I may have missed it. I didn't see IV starts on the competency list for licensing. But yeah,
It's there.
okay.
It's both
Yeah,
in the
I
skills,
wouldn't know the best way to
skills.
do it, but at least the training where you're doing a nice faux IV start would definitely be something I'd like to see as a requirement.
So we're trying to avoid completely having prerequisites to taking these competencies. The idea is you can do it or you can't, and they have to do, as part of their skills exam, both an AC start and a non-AC start with the for the GBS. So that includes the saline lock and doing that part correctly. So we really tried to get away from, now we could say to keep it away from HLO trying to verify, if it goes through the government, the expectation is that we are verifying these things in some way, right? That somehow HLO is hunting people down and making sure they're doing this. It's not like, so you could have something notarized that they give to the proctor, or something that goes to the proctor, and the proctor could be the gatekeeper, and that might be easy.
Yeah.
Sammy, you have a thought?
yeah, you can put like, must do at least 10 IV starts on a human being. We're not gonna go and count those. We're not gonna require you submit something. Like all of our other professions, we don't see that they did 100 haircuts and 200. It's, the teacher did it. They have all their documents in a file somewhere, and if we need them, we'll ask for them. Otherwise, we get the transcript just like the certificate. So if you wanted to say, you must do some stuff on live human beings, you can do that. And we're not gonna like go hunting down how many you did.
Well, already to be licensed in Oregon, they have to be a certified professional midwife. And on the skills sign-off sheet for certified professional midwives is IV. So if they are lying about that and it comes back to bite them, and that's when it gets followed up, then they will be very vulnerable. And also, if they're liars, then they can have their license removed and, revoked, etc. So the documentation of the skill itself is on the documentation that is either the MEEC accredited school is maintaining, or the PEP processes documenting for the competency based, or however. So it is being documented that they have the skill. It's just being documented at the training site, not at this point. Is that helpful, Laura?
Yeah, this is Emilia, and that's what I was gonna say, is it seems to me that that step has already, if they're gonna be given a license by the state, they are already gonna be like they have proof that they have done, like you just said, their IV skills somewhere else. I agree. I don't think being able to do an IV start on even the best model demonstrates that you can do an IV on a human being. The best models are they're just not even, I don't know. I've never used that one that you're talking about, Willa. Maybe it is like super accurate, but if they're going to be granted a license, there's another step around IV skills that will have been checked off by somebody else that they give to the state. So that feels like it covers it in my mind.
That was our thinking, my thinking, and the committee's thinking. So this is a really gratifying discussion for me. So thank you, everyone. I really like it. Andrea, any thoughts? You're looking Sphinx-like, as you often do.
I'm not sure if I'm an official RAC member or not. There was a breakdown in communication about whether I'm a public member or RAC member, so I've been quietly waiting for email confirmation of whether or not I'm allowed to chime in now or wait until later. That's why I'm making a face.
Henry, I don't know what happened. Yes.
Oh,
you
no,
are-
it's no problem. I just wanted to make sure I knew. And I haven't had anything else to add, honestly. It's
Okay.
the thoughts that have come up for me that really I don't think have been discussed yet is just the logistics of rolling out a proctor process and making sure that people are clear on how to become a proctor in order to implement this for everyone who's currently practicing, just because it sounds like it has a nice amount of flexibility. But also within that means that there's not always as much clarity, and sometimes that can cause a different type of stress. And so that's sort of my question I've been hanging on to, is around any planning around helping people understand the rollout process, how when they're renewing in particular, how they're gonna arrange to get proctors in a way that works well and meets everybody's needs in the timely manner. So everything else I've heard has been great, and I haven't had anything to add on to it.
That is something we have not discussed in detail. We did discuss what the requirements are. And Sammy, did you send out the proposed proctor registration, the application form? I'm sorry.
Yes. I think 76.
Okay. So you can see if you go to page, you said 73, right? It's in that room, there's an echo, so sometimes it's a little hard to hear exactly what you're saying. At least that's my experience. So you'll see that they have to give their name, birthday, gender, state requirement kinds of things, a physical address, email and social security number are required. Again, the social security is a state requirement. Then there are the proctor qualifications for each of the 3 exams, and the applicant has to provide a current copy of their qualifying credential, their license, their CPM, whatever it is, their medical license, whatever, for, and then in each of the categories, you can see who is qualified and you can see the other category. And this is also reflected in the proposed rules, and I don't remember exactly where they are, but this is all in there. Especially the supervision requirement. I remember that specifically is in there. Actually, all of this is specifically in there listed. So you are agreeing as a qualified proctor to supervise one examinee at a time in real time, like I said, virtually or in person, exercise management, guidance, and control over the examination. So if you feel like you can't do that from a distance, then you should do it in real life. Professional judgment and responsible for all matters, document the skills performed by the examinee on the form provided, which is the skills packet, skills examination packet, and all of the many 1.22, 1.23, 1.24, check, pass, fail, pass, fail. So they have to check all of that off, and maintain the documentation for 5 years. Follow, I'm looking at a different copy than you are. Follow the template, verifying the steps, respond to all requests for information related to the exam. So sets out exactly what you have to do in that regard. We haven't discussed how we're going to implement it because that almost feels like jinxing it a little bit because we really want to get this, like, we still have many steps ahead of us. But I am assuming that OHLO can send an email out to all of the licensees, letting them know about this and what the requirements are. Of course, it's in the rules as well. So everybody always, when there's a rule change, OHLO, in my experience, has always sent out the rules, which I know people look at and go, yeah, that's good to know. But I also know that Sammy has at times kind of put the key points to look at, like this is the stuff you need to know about. And so hopefully that will be enough. And then I'm happy to come to an OMC meeting, or other people might be willing to do that so we can do it on that level. So I think there's a good way to roll this out between OHLO and OMC to make it as accessible as we can to people. Now, not everybody pays attention and does the things, but that was my thought about it. And I saw Andrea do a big thumbs up about that idea, so.
Can I ask you one more question, Holly?
I don't know.
It's related. You said that if people are doing a virtual proctoring, that it needs to be one-on-one, which makes sense so that the proctor can really follow what the person is doing who's doing this, like, training, or I'm sorry, testing. If it's an in-person situation, will it be considered appropriate for multiple people to renew together at the same time, akin to a class setting, or is that also considered to be not adequate for the proctor to assess competency?
For training, that's fine. For assessment, it's one-on-one. For the exam, it's one-on-one. So,
Okay.
yeah. And having done this a lot of times, I can tell you it's very difficult to do more than one. And we used to do suturing one-on-one sometimes at Birthing Wave for the renewal. And it got to where we were doing that less because it was so difficult to make sure that everybody was getting the right amount of attention to make sure they were doing everything completely correct, one step at a time. So that's why we're recommending no. For if you wanted to have a morning practice and then slots to do afternoon testing, you know, I can advise people about how long it takes to do the testing on these skills. Remember that for meds by injection, we're talking about 4 different kinds of injections. It's not just an IM. So for all 3 tests, overall, probably about 3 hours. Usually less, but about 3 hours for all of both types of IVs, the suturing second degree, basic second degree, and the 4 different kinds of injections, which includes the suturing anesthetic for second degree. We want it accessible, but we want to make sure that it is rigorous. Not just, yeah, whatever, you know, so. Sammy, if they don't have their questions, will we go maybe a little more through the OAR's proposal?
Yes.
And I noticed on the copy you sent us, the whitey out stuff is gone. So it might be helpful for you to highlight where the changes have happened.
Okay. Get over it.
And I have my copy from October 22nd, just in case you don't have your version.
What did you say is gone? I'm sorry.
Well, for instance, what you sent us is a beautiful, and I printed it off because I was so impressed because it's awesome. The unofficial version of the OIRs as they're going to be included, but what it does not include is like this page, which has highlighted stuff and things crossed out that were removed and added. So it might be helpful to people or not. If not, everybody give me a big thumbs down. But for us to say, for instance, in 332-015-0030, which is page 4 of 34 on the OARs.
Oh, page 103 in the packet.
Yeah, that's not in front of me.
Yep, that's
So
what we
that's
got.
why I'm asking you if maybe you could do it.
Yep, page 103. And so just a little tutorial on rules. Anything that's bold is new, and anything that's struck through is out. And this is obviously a proposal, and you guys have floor to make changes, ask questions, anything like that. So the rules start on page 100. And I added definitions just as a reference point. At this point, I didn't see any definitions that needed added, but you never know. Also, added what the direct entry midwifery license is, how long it's good for as a reference point. And so then the real work starts on page 103. And you can see that G, so all this work that's done, what it comes down to is that you are must submit a passing score, proof of a passing score of the legend drugs and devices exam described in the OAR within 2 years prior to the date of application on a form prescribed by the office. Form must be submitted directly to the office by the approved proctor in the OAR. So that's really all this work comes down to that rule. This is what's going to say you are qualified. You meet this baseline competency to be providing this service when you get your license. And if you look on page 104 and you see number 5 and 6 that are struck through, this is where currently you can get your license and not have received your legend drugs and devices training. That is going away. So kind of going back to what Holly said earlier, that goes away, and now we've added you must pass this exam before you get your license. So we know, everyone knows you're competent based on competencies, which you have already reviewed. Any questions about that?
The reason why we set it at 2 years prior is we want to make sure that the passing of the exams is within a reasonable amount of time. So if it's been more than 2 years, we're requiring people to renew every 3 years. So it seems like it's reasonable to say you have to have the training, or not the training, but the exams done and passed within 2 years of applying. So we're again trying to be flexible, but not like walked all over.
I have a question. This is Janelle. So for someone who attended a MEEC school, who then did LD&D through them, in theory, they would still have to take this exam as well. So
Everybody takes the exam, yeah. But if you're already licensed, it would be in the context of renewal, not in the context of the first time you're getting licensed. It would be every 3 years instead of, just like it used to be. I think, Janelle, I don't remember because it's been so long for all of us, but it may be that when you were renewing, you weren't one in that cohort for many years. People had to retest every 2 years. So, and then we moved away from that to the 5 hours of continuing education. So this is kind of going back to what it was before.
Okay.
But
And
every
then
3 years.
Oh, sorry.
Go
The
ahead.
2 years or the 3 years for renewal once somebody is licensed for that new grad, would that start the timeline when they receive their license? Will there be clarity on that, or from when they initially took the exam? Say if someone,
From when they get their license,
okay, great.
because you renew your license every year, and
Yeah.
every third year you would need to have this exam submitted, these exams.
Someone could go 5 years in theory then.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Let's say I'm a student, I'm attending Midwifes College of Utah, and I know I'm gonna graduate spring of 2027, and I'm like, okay, I could take that exam now. It's fresh in my brain. Let me just do it now. And then I fast forward, it's a year and a half, and I graduate in spring, and I get my CPM, and now I'm applying for my license. But I did that exam a year and a half ago. Now the time clock starts at 3, so someone who's a new midwife could go, in theory, 5
Yeah.
years between
In
exams.
theory, they could go 5 years.
It could.
Most of the time, that's not what happens.
Yeah, for sure.
And remember that the person who examined her it would not be at her schools to complete the course. It would be an additional or layered onto using our tools, the state of Oregon's tools, and an approved proctor by the state of Oregon. So that student would need to know 2 years ahead of time that they were planning to move to Oregon to get licensed. So just taking the school's graduation from that course exam is not sufficient.
This is Emilia. Yeah, that seems like the likelihood of that, sadly, because there's not a midwifery school in Oregon, we're going to run up against that so rarely. Like if there was still a midwifery school in Oregon, that might be might be more common, but it seems very unlikely.
I mean, this is Janelle again. I mean, I have had students over the last, since Birthing Way closed, from MCU, from SWC, from, I don't, what's the other one? The one in Idaho. I've had at least 3 different schools I've been a preceptor for, so.
And that's part of what we were aware of when we put this together, is that those students coming from different places with different numbers and requirements and things, as long as they can pass these exams that are administered by the written exam by the state, the skills exams by an approved proctor, it doesn't matter what school they went to, as long as they have the skills, they have their CPM in hand, and they can pass the exams. So it's in my experience with having dealt with helping students from other states when Birthing Way was in place, was that 2 years before they graduated, they had no desire to try to get a credential already, for a state they weren't completely sure they were going to practice in.
Well, these students live in Oregon because those are distance programs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still. So, but if a school does decide to become a proctor and is willing to do that for their students, you're right. The student has 2 years before their license, then their license, and then 3 years before they need to renew. Every 3 years after that, they would have to retest. But to make that window, I mean, we could make that window 1 year, but that really does limit. You might have had one, I mean, it's totally doable to make it 1 year instead of 2 years. I definitely wouldn't make it less than that. And 2 years gives a lot of flexibility. I don't have any personal opposition to making it 1 year, because I can be kind of hard about stuff like that. But that's a recommendation for this group to make, whether they think the total potential for 5 years before retesting is too much. If we reduce that pre-testing time frame to 1 year, then it would mean a total of 4 years potentially before somebody would be examined and then be re-examined.
This is Janelle. I would argue for a year.
You're advocating for a year. Other thoughts?
Yeah.
I have a thought. What if you, like this, leave it at 2 and change the renewal to every 2?
That's a lot more renewal, a lot more hassle than just having this rare situation where somebody wants to take their test 2 years before their licensing. How many people, maybe we should do a show of hands of how many people are in support of changing it to 1 year. Do you want to do that, Sammy?
I can, or I can bring both options to the board.
Yeah, they don't like that kind of thing in my experience very much. Because then they're just going to have another show of hands, so.
I just,
Yeah.
Emilia, I just want to ask a clarifying question before I say my opinion. So the concern is, Janelle, which seems very founded, is that a new licensee in Oregon could have taken this test 2 years before they get their license, and then they won't have to do the renewal for 3 more years, so they could go 5 years without showing competency. That's the concern, right?
This is Janelle. Yeah, that's correct. And mostly not that midwives that are actively practicing need to, I like the 3 years. The 2 years always felt a lot when we had to do it in person. But thinking like a brand new green midwife, then not being reassessed for skills and competencies, in theory, if it's greater than, I mean, 4 years feels a lot too, but greater than 4 years. And, you know, it's not something I'll fight, but.
No, I think it's, yeah. And then, but then if we're thinking of a midwife who's coming from a different state and has been a midwife for 15 years and has been, or however many years, and is coming and getting their first license in Oregon, I guess that could happen also. They could be like, I'm gonna do this maybe I'm gonna move to Oregon in 2 years or next year, and then actually I push it 2 years, so I take the test and then I don't actually get my license. They could also that could also fall under that like 5-year place.
Maybe, and in that situation, right, the rules vary state to state, right? So they might not be able, you know, in a state where they're not able to use Pitocin, then that could be valid also.
Right.
But they still have to take the written exam to get the license.
My example was someone's like, I'm going to move to Oregon in the fall. It's the summer. I'm going to take the test. And then I have another baby, so I stay where I am for 2 years. And then I move to Oregon. I don't have to actually retake it again for 3 more years. They could go 5 years.
Yes.
So that's
Anybody
another
could.
example when that might happen. 1 year seems reasonable. I don't know.
Anybody who who really wants to advocate for 2 years? What are the downside of having 1 year? Any thought about that? Somebody might have to retest, but they might have to retest with the 2-year limit too.
Well,
More likely.
You know, this is Willa, and I just wanted to clarify, like this test, I mean, I guess my understanding is that people would be sitting for this test. This is like they have already earned their CPM. That was
That's right.
Okay. So
not necessarily.
But it's not required that they have to get the license, they have to sit for their CPM. To take the exam, if they're attending a school, they could potentially do exactly what Janelle was talking about.
They could get they could do their legend drugs and devices exams before getting their CPM. And then once they apply here, whoop, they all match up and you're good. But
Right.
they could do it before either way.
yeah,
And at MEEC accredited schools, that is not unusual. Like at Birthing Way, we made sure that our students met those LD&D requirements. And if it was outside of the 2-year requirement for education, which is where this comes from, it was originally the initial training had to be an X amount of time, then they had to retest.
I don't know. I think we're almost making it too complicated, but I see all the ins and outs. I mean, I would say this, having been a midwife for a long time myself and involved, you know, in being a training site and being preceptor for MEEC schools and PEP and everything else, the MEEC students regardless of which school they're going to go to, they're getting these hands-on skills and requirements and required skills sessions all the time. The PEP students are not, but they're in programs with preceptors that are doing these things in real time. I don't know. Going to 1 year just seems so harsh. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, but I get it, because you're like, why would you want to be waiting 5 years in between? I don't know.
I mean, with the 1 year, the worst case scenario is you have to retest.
Yeah.
Because it's been 1 year and 3 days, and so you have to retest. And that's not saying you have to do, that's all you have to do. I mean, it'll cost you $50 more. Well, what I'm hearing is that maybe we should change that to 1 year and highlight it for the board, Sammy, so that they're aware that that change was made.
Can I offer a suggestion, Jen? From what I'm
Go for it.
hearing, the hang up is new certifications, new people getting their licensure. I wonder if we just make a distinction between when you get your initial, like, is there a way to do that, separating it out for the rules for your initial licensure versus renewals?
You
Where
could say after
initial
1
has
year
to
of
be
getting
within
licensed.
1
Yeah.
year. And then renewals, you could put that out to whatever you wanted, 2 or 3.
You want
And
to
that
make
way-
sure, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, and that way, I think it maybe cuts down on some of these concerns with people like going to school and then getting their initial licensure, because you're gonna have a leash on people if they're renewing every, is it 3 years?
Mhm.
Then you can just couple those. But it's the initial one I think we're getting tripped up on. So the rule could be different for initial certification versus renewal.
It could be, and probably half of the people who apply are already licensed in another state, already credentialed, and are not brand new. They're not coming straight out of a school. They're coming from another state. And because we don't have straight reciprocity because of the differences, everybody coming in, whether they've been licensed for 20 years and able to do this or not, would still have to take this exam. So asking them to take it again in another year, say, or in 2 years instead of 3, is not going to help those applicants. It might be seen as a little much. Plus, we have to figure out a system that it's standard. So we can't say we're not looking at people's education. We're not looking at that kind of thing. We're just looking at their CPM. We're not even looking to see, although they often submit it, are they licensed in another state? And what that state is. I provided HLO with a list as of this moment of which states that are licensed, and of those licensed states, which ones allow all 3 of these skills to be practiced. There are additional states that only require 2 of them, allow 2 of them to be practiced, or 1 of them to be practiced. It is it's the Wild West compared to other health professions. And so we want to make sure that that it's not asking staff to make value judgments or probe into things that are going to create a lot of work and slow the whole thing down a lot. We want to get people licensed, and so while I love that idea, it feels to me, and I think that it will create layers of assessment that might be burdensome to figure out. Yeah, you definitely need to retest in a year, but you don't. So for instance, students who graduated from Birthing Way did 20, I believe it was by the end, 20 live IV starts. It might have been 18. And other great MEEK schools, it's 5. And then in PEP, it might be 1. So you're looking at different levels of competency and experience.
Maybe I need to clarify my thought. It's the within, changing it from within 2 years to within 1 year. So they don't necessarily have to continue to come back in 1 year. It's just with an initial credentialing, it has to be within 1 year. And then for recurrent, it can be within 2 years. Does that make sense? maybe?
Well, right now renewal is 3 years unless we change it to 2 years.
Correct. I'm just trying to cut down on this 5-year, 4-year business. And it seemed to me that all of the examples brought up were people getting their initial certification.
Right, that's the concern, because that's the only time where it has the potential to be 5 years.
Correct. So
Can-
if we
Can I clarify?
made, go ahead.
Are you talking about initial licensure or
Yes.
credentialing? Because those are two.
Licensure. I
Okay.
guess licensure. And this is again, me coming from, this is my very first meeting for anything like this. So learning about this Wild West world is tricky. And so I might be using the wrong words.
No, you got it. It's licensure. That is the
Okay.
2 years. They have to, the way it's currently written, within 2 years of applying for licensure, they have to take and pass all the skills exams and the written exam. And then once they're licensed, they renew 3 years later. So that
Correct.
gives a potential total of 5 years. Now, personally, I don't think that's going to come up very often, that somebody does it so far ahead. Usually some of these skills, at least suturing on IV, are not first year skills at a midwifery school or in a preceptorship. But it is potentially possible, especially with Emilia's scenario, where somebody's already a midwife in another state and is not in a school and takes the exam, and then something comes up. Or it could happen to anyone who takes the exam thinking they're going to turn in their application tomorrow, and then lo and behold, their mother-in-law gets sick or whatever, so anybody could face that. The question is, do we want that potential maximum time frame to be 5 years or 4 years? And doing what Jen suggests would reduce that time frame, but I'm trying to imagine how we would do it in such a way. I guess we would say, after you're first licensed, with your first renewal, you have to retest.
No, sorry to keep cutting back in. I think it would just be with your initial licensure, it has to be within 1 year. And then for every time you re-credential, you re-license and you renew, that's where the 2-year rule can come in.
There isn't a 2-year rule. So there isn't a 2-year rule.
But within the 2-year, the 2-year application, right? That's as it stands. Is that? And I don't know how easy it is to tell. I would assume it's fairly easy
I
to tell
see what you're
initial versus
saying.
renewal.
Thank you for being patient. I've got it.
Not see.
Let me summarize what I'm hearing. So I'm hearing that you're supporting the 1 year idea before licensure. And then after that, when you're renewing, our assumption was people would take that test to renew right before it expires, close to the end of the 3rd year, right? So they wouldn't be taking the exam after 1 year of licensure. They would take it somewhere between year 2 and 3. So
Correct.
less than 2 years. And what you're saying is that this rule about 2 years would apply to renewals as well. So you can't get licensed and immediately take the exam and it's good for 3 years. It's only good for up to 2 years when you're renewing. So that part would stay the same. But on your initial application, you have to have taken the exams within 1 year of applying for licensure. Is that right? I am on it. Thank you for being
I
patient.
don't have any idea what needs to change in the rule, except the 2 years to 1 year.
Well, the change you would only change it from 2 years to 1 year for your initial application.
Right.
And then after that, it stays the same. You have to have taken the exam within 2 years of renewing your license. That's the part that I didn't get, that we
So
missed.
that would be changing from 3 years to within.
No. You have to, so right now, the way this rule reads is sometimes in the 2 years before you renew every 3 years, you have to take the exam. We don't have it that it says you must take that exam when you're renewing your 3rd time every 3 years. When you're not taking it the day of your renewal. You're not taking it, are you taking it a week before, a year before, 2 years before? Because sometime before you turn in your application on that third, every 3 years, you have to have it. How old can it be is the question.
Take it anytime within the 3 years. That's what this says
Well,
today.
what this is saying is you take it anytime within 2 years of when you renew. That was brilliant, Jen, by the way. I'm even going to use the word awesome, just, you know.
You get it.
I know, it's pressure, isn't it? It's a lot of pressure. So Sammy, does that, first of all, I can talk to Sammy about this and hammer it out if you want, but I want to make sure everybody else is kind of on board with that. You take your initial within 1 year of applying for licensure, which granted could take, you know, it doesn't happen instantaneously, by the way. And then after that, you renew every 3 years that you renew. When you renew, not your first year, not your second year, but in the third year, when you renew, you have to provide documentation that you have passed the exams within 2 years of that third year. Or do we want that also to be 1 year? You have to have taken the
You are
test within 1
making
year.
Way too complicated for licensees and for staff. This will be very complicated. Because
How
then it's
so?
every 2 years.
Well, that's what it says right now.
Now it says an LDM renewing their license must submit proof of passing the Legend Drugs and Devices exam every 3 years on a form prescribed by the office.
But it doesn't say how far before you renew every 3 years you can take that exam, those
You can take
exams.
any time in 3 years.
This is Janelle. I think what that would read to me is that if I took it early, let's say, because actually my LD&D is due next year. So let's pretend like this rules effect and I took it next year, 2026. I know that I have to do it every 3 years. So the next time it's due, it would be 2029 because it has to
Right.
be every 3 years, regardless of whenever I initially was licensed. And if I took it early in 2025, then it's due in 2028. It's just every 3 years period. That's what that reads to me.
It's not limiting you in when in the 3 years.
Right, you just have to do it every 3 years,
Yeah.
period. It's
Here's
like
what's-
your CPR, you do it every 2 years. It's just every 2 years. It doesn't
Every time
matter.
somebody renews, they're gonna come and ask me, what do we have to do to get this person renewed? Because we don't know the time.
And then it starts over. You do it and then it's 3 years from
The
then.
initial.
And then it starts over.
So,
That makes sense.
okay, yeah, we can talk about it offline.
Now, this is good, meaty stuff for us to be thinking through. And what I'm hearing is people feel like for the initial, they think that it's important that that testing be done within a year of applying for the license. Is there anybody who that is not, I'm not reflecting that correctly. And then once they have their initial license, every 3 years, they have to provide proof that they have taken that exam, those exams, I call it that exam, but it's multiple exams, and taken those exams within the past 3 years, within the past 2 years. Jen?
Yes, I think my brain also just came to an important realization. We are not requiring people to take the exams every year.
No.
We could just change this entirely to within 1 year, whether it's renewal or initial, because to your point, once renewals come around, it's just going to be that you have to have taken it it's going to be every 3 years. That was a really great example that was brought up because yeah, it's not that you have to take the test every year. It's that you have to show proof of having done it within the previous year. So you could even just move that from within 1 year to within 2 years to within 1 year, and it would accomplish the same goal across the board.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. And it would address that concern of the staff having to try to figure it out,
Right.
you know, so.
There's a hand
Okay,
raised.
Andrea, thank you.
Andrea, yeah, I guess what I'm catching on to is that there isn't currently language specifying whether it's the same as NRP and CPR, where you need it every so many years and the timer is set by when did you last do it. So you last did your CPR on this date, you're due to have it renewed by 2 years from that time. Same with NRP. I guess with the wording, it sounds like it could be interpreted to mean either that method of you need to be renewing Legend Drugs and Devices every 3 years from when you last took it, or to mean that every 3 years you have to have had it in the last 3 years, which could end up in that situation where you get a chance to take it right after you renew your license. 3 years later, you have taken it in the last 3 years. You say, yes, I took it. Now you don't have to renew again until you're close to the end of your next 3-year window. So then you could really almost go 6 years without actually doing the testing and still be in compliance. So I can see how the wording can really change how that applies and how often people will ultimately be required to do this testing. So in my opinion, clarity around that timing is really important because it can make the difference between 3 years or almost 6 years, potentially.
Well,
Also acknowledging that the likelihood that somebody will get their license renewed and every 3 years, and then sometime sooner than they need to, much sooner than they need to, pay for and sit through this testing. As somebody who has done emergency born resuscitation for people who had 24 hours to get it done, I can tell you the likelihood of somebody doing it 2.5 years ahead of time is as close to zero as you can be with human beings. But it's true. It is a long, and that's true, more true with the renewal, I think, than it is with the initial. But if we make it the 1 year for both, that takes care of that problem.
if you guys go to page 114 and read that language, let's talk about it. Let's go to 114 and look at it.
13.
Number 5.
This is the renewal page, right? Continuing education.
Page 114, number 5.
On my copy, number 5 is on page 113, just FYI.
You got a bad copy.
You sent it to me, my dear. So an LDM renewing their license must, is that what we're looking at there?
Yep.
So the way this is worded, every 3 years of passing the Legend Drugs and Devices exam, every 3 years, even that makes it sound like if you took it 2.5 years, that wouldn't be quite right.
But, sorry, this is Janelle. We renew our license every year. So every time you renew your license, you're asked that slew of questions if you've met all the requirements.
That's for your
renewal.
testing. You have to submit a passing score here.
Yeah, but even if it's been 2.5 years, I can't wait 3 years because like then I'm lying on my license renewal.
It's gonna come up and tell you, just like it would for your,
NRP?
I don't think this would pop up every time. I don't know. I don't like to be honest, you know?
Don't.
If it would
You're
pop up
only,
here, it's,
you're
I don't know.
submitting proof every 3 years, but it doesn't say how long it's been since you took the exam. So are you submitting proof that you took it 6 years ago?
you're submitting proof that you took it sometime in the 3 years since you.
It doesn't say that. It says submit proof every 3 years. It doesn't say how long the test has to have been taken. The only place it addresses that is in the section we were working on before, the 0150030G, new G.
Okay. We'll
Where it
have
says
to,
submit proof of passing. And even that says submit proof within 2 years. Nowhere does it actually say how long ago you have to have taken the exams.
This is Amelia. Is there a way that we can like I was thinking along the lines of Andrea of like everyone knows that their CPR, they took it and then then it expires and you have to get it done before it expires. Why can't we just say like you did it, it expires March of 2027, so you have to do it by March of 2027 and then when you complete it, you get a thing that says this is good till March of 20 whatever 3 years from 2027 is, and then you submit it like just like it's like a renewal card, because it might be like the thing is that when you know, as we know, like I renew my license in June every year, and so I might take it. I don't need to be reminded in June that I need to take it. I mean, need to be reminded 3 years from when I last took it. So let's just make it like a CPR card with an expiration date.
This is Willa, and I was gonna say the same exact thing, Emily. It was like, why don't we just have an like the good through date, beginning of good through, it expires, and then all the wording doesn't really matter because we already know that it's good through and it's expiring on certain date. We're aware ahead of time, the state knows ahead of time. And it's just another date on our spreadsheet to know we have to renew everything and our algorithm before that date.
So what that would require, Sammy, is the state to have the preceptor or somewhere on the form that we have at the end of the skills checklist to have something that says good through or must be renewed after or something like that. So that it's really clear to the state and to the student that it's only good for 3 years. For 2 years, or however long we want it to be good for. I know it's not as straightforward as we thought, and we didn't spend any time talking about this. So this is really great. This is why we have a RAC. So that way, this wording, whatever wording we come up with, submit proof of passing within however many years, you're just submitting the proof. The taking is good for 3 years, regardless of when you take it. So this would cover the student who takes it 2 years ahead of time. Her taking of it is only good for 3 years. So she may have to renew it at the end of her first year of licensing because her taking of it has expired, is what I'm hearing be proposed. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, just that it's like it's your LD&D card and it's good for 3 years. So it needs to be current when you renew your license. Always. It always has to be current when you renew your license, just like you always have to have a CPR card and you always have to have an NRP card, and it renews every 3 years.
And then I can almost hear Sammy going, and what if
Well, I can hear
I've known her for 30 years.
coming
So
to my desk and saying, I don't know how to renew this person.
yeah.
I don't either.
Are each of the skills going to have their own card because they could be tested on different days?
No.
We have never discussed that. It was just we need a passing score. It wasn't this special card with a valid through.
I know, this is all new.
No, it's a month. Like when you get your CPR card, it expires at the end of the month. And you know what? People can just do it. We can tell them you just have to do it all in the same month. Like that's fine. I hear, Sammy, that this is super annoying. I totally
Oh, it's not annoying. I'm just trying to put it into actual practice.
But I think for midwives, this will make total sense because it's how they operate for their CEUs for all their credentials, all their other things they have to have. You don't have to. So I think it will make sense to the midwives.
How do you guys track for like NRP and CPR? Because we have to attest that yeah, so that can't be similar for this.
We don't.
Yeah, but who's issuing the card, Janelle?
What's that, Holly?
Who's issuing the card? In the case of NRP or Bourne or whoever, that agency is issuing the card. But this is testing through proctors approved by OHLO. Now, for the written test, we have that record. That's easy to look and see it's been within X number of years. But so are we talking about creating that's why I said we might need to use the form that we already have the proctor fill out that has this is good through X date. And that is in effect what the student resubmits every 3 years rather than creating a separate card. Because up until now, as far as I know, OHLO has not released cards in the way that NRP does cards, because OHLO is not the licensing agency, it's the administrator of the licensing board. Now the board could do cards potentially, but that's now a thing, we could give them to the proctors to give to the students.
Well,
This is going to require a little thinking through.
Can I ask a question? Currently, what's the plan for proof that you did the renewal?
That you've done the testing, you've
Yes.
taken the test through the state, and the proctor has turned in the certificate that has the new date on it.
Yeah.
Which is why maybe having it's good
That's
through
all.
on that form will make sense.
Like, I don't see the need for like a card. That's just the like, here it is. It's good for 3 years from the date that you took it. It's
Right.
as simple as that. There's already something that I don't see HLO issuing something. It's just, that's what it says is this, you took this test on March 31st, 2027. It expires on March 31st, 2030, 20, whatever it is.
Math is bad.
That's all. It's not like an
Yeah.
official card.
It's a small change to the form that we're already using. And an education piece. Yeah.
And it's very clear to everybody when they need to renew by.
Well,
Yes, because it's right on there.
And that's similar to how it's always been. I mean, or used to be, Julia, whoever was training us would come. We never even saw our sheets. We just knew they were good for a couple of years. She sent them straight to the state, and we all knew within 2 years or 3, it was 2 years, but we had to have a new training done. It's the same thing. It's just a different form and a different format.
Right.
You were testing back then, now you're submitting something that we have to make sure it's actually completed. Before it was just a test and move along. There was nothing for us to really look at except that you signed something.
Yeah, you had to make sure the proctor had checked everything off. And now it's the same. It's just an extra line that says for the midwife's edification, how long this is good for. And then she'll submit a new form with the new dates on it when she retests. Sammy, we should talk about this off camera. I think we can make this work with minimum or no additional work for OHLO. But the main thing is it does impact G on 0150030, where it says that you have to submit proof within 2 years prior to the date of application. And actually, do we want to keep that for initial? Do we want to change that for initial to 1 year? Or do we just want to say it's good for 3 years? And if you turn it in and it's at the end of its 3 years, you're going to have to retake it again because you can't renew with an expired one. So you'll have to take it within a year. Okay. So that would be changed to 3 years. I really am clear on this, Sammy. So I think we can figure it out. And if not, we'll figure out what the next steps are, maybe with the board. You don't feel, I can tell you are feeling
No, I'm
concerned.
All
Are
I
you
have to
okay?
do is follow the rules. Somebody else has to make sure these are all right, but we'd like to get the license.
What I'm hearing is you and I get to have another meeting. Yay! You and I and Derek. All right. So we're on, basically we made it as far as the 3rd page of the of the rules. But this was important and I have to blame myself because I'm the one who brought it up. So we're going back to page, what was it, 103? Did you say, Sammy? Was where we were starting off before we moved to page, the other one, the later one?
Page 103. Yeah, 103.
What's happening here? Okay, so we're going to change that to within 3 years. We'll have to craft this. Just maybe highlight it, Sammy, so we can figure it out.
Okay.
Then we're requiring the applicant to maintain a record of documents required. that could be stored electronically. So whatever they're using to apply for their license, this is on page 5 of the rules, which is on mine, it's page 103, but it sounds like on Sammy's, it's page 104. So a copy of your CPM, which most of us are not going to throw away, whatever you're using. And then when you go to page 104 or 105 under education, you can see that we got rid of some stuff and added some stuff. So 2 and 3 are new. It's just saying that the board has adopted those as of that date. And that could become a different date, depending. But God willing, it'll be no later than then. Any questions about that? Okay, moving on to page 105 or 106 or 107, depending on where you are in it, which is 332-015-0050. We've removed NARM midwifery and we've put all of the exams in here, including the number 1 now just says a board approved exam, which gives us flexibility. It doesn't specifically say NARM here. And then it talks about the need to take that an application for licensure must pass these LD&D exams prior to being licensed or renewing. And then it talks about the 4 parts, the written exam, and then the 3 skills. And that you have to pass all the parts. And you have to pay all responsible exam fees as the applicant, including any fees that you pay to the proctor. And you can retake the written exam the next business day. And if you've taken it 3 times, the written exam, or any other portion of the assessment. So what this says is that 6 is talking about the written exam. You can retake it apparently infinite number of times, just it's the next day. If you fail any portion of the skills assessment 3 times, you have to wait 6 months before taking that portion of the skills exam for the 4th time. And our idea here was you've got to get a clue, you need to do a little more training. Anybody have any questions or concerns about this section?
My only question is to establish what a passing grade on the written exam would be.
We usually don't put do we usually put that in rules, Sammy?
No. What's considered a pass fail?
Oh, I saw it somewhere in this document. It's Jen. I thought it was 80%.
Saw that too, yeah.
Yeah, it is. I think we did talk about 80% for sure. I don't know why it's not in this section. Must be in a later. Oh, it must be in the section where we talk more completely about it down below. Is everybody okay? Well, we'll get to the 80% in a minute. Okay, now we've moved on to lovely page 108, 109, 332-015-0060. And this is talking about proctor requirements for the skills assessment. So you have to be approved, submit the application, submit proof of holding the qualifying credential with no current disciplinary action opposed by the board or other regulatory body. And then it goes through the list for each of the skills, what the requirements are, which are the same as was on the form. And then prior to proctoring an exam, you have to have approval, which could be sent electronically, but you can't proctor it and then apply to be a proctor. For one thing, you might not have access to the materials you need. And then 6, if an applicant to be a proctor here does not meet the requirements, then you can submit documentation approved by the office showing blah, 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 blah. And that documentation has not yet been specified because it's going to vary. And then it talks about number 7, direct supervision of an approved proctor, virtually in real time. And then this section, section 8, is all the things that were on that form that I read about supervising one examinee at a time, exercising management and control, all of that. And then an approved proctor may also provide legend drugs and devices education listed under 332-015-0040. And that is up above that we already talked about. A lot of things refer back to each other. And that's the end of that section. Any questions about any of that? Next one is on page 111, 112, 0150070. So before you take the skills assessment as the student, the potential licensee, you have to submit a completed application form and payment of all required fees. So you have to apply for the license. Oh, this is interesting, Sammy. This is addressing directly what we were just talking about. Before you can take an exam, a skills or written exam, you have to submit a completed application form. So is this saying before they take the skills exams and the written exam, they have to apply for the license?
No, I don't know why I put there and accompanied by payment of all fees. That shouldn't be there.
I thought we decided that we didn't need this section.
Holly, can you say where you are?
I'm on 332-015-0070, which is page 13 of the rules and page 111 or 112 on Sammy's of the packet we sent you.
This was verifying their identity.
Yeah. So I was concerned about people, especially taking the written exam for somebody else, which would be easy to do. And so the idea was to come up with a section, and this is what we came up with, which is not doing what we had hoped it would do, as it turns out. But our best stab at, you have to be able to identify yourself. Part of what we would require was that they provide ID, kind of like happens with the national exam.
That's what 33103000000 is. That's identification.
Mhm. But my concern is that skills exams are different than the written exam, and this is for skills assessment examination.
Oh.
So I thought we removed this and you added the part about the identification later.
No, but I can get rid of it.
Well, I think it sounds like we're wanting to allow, that the RAC is saying, let's allow people to take the exam and they should take it prior to applying for the license. At least the skills exams prior to applying for the license. So if that's true, what completed application form would the individual be submitting?
An exam form.
So we're going to create a special exam
We
form.
have one already created. That we use,
Okay.
but we don't have to do that.
What's the name of that form? Maybe we should, no, we decided not to put a name in. I'm remembering all this now. This is a problem with the process taking over 6 years. The individual must submit a completed application form to request. Okay. It's not the application form. It is a skills assessment or but it's also for the written, it's mostly for the written exam that we're concerned about it, actually, not the skills.
We don't go in and push a button, like if an RT wants to take the workday exam. We don't go in and push a button and allow them to do it. They have to go in and sign up and all of that and just do it.
Right, right.
So that's how
maybe, should we maybe remove the word skills from this title of this section?
Is there a way to lock it down so they couldn't just go in and take it?
I was gonna say, it's possible that we could basically just make it private and then licensing or one of us could send them a link to the exam once they've been approved.
Okay, that's.
Because it wasn't the skills exam that we were talking about being mostly concerned about.
Yeah.
It was the distance, the virtual written exam that is easier to cheat.
Yeah, I
Because
changed
it's-
that.
Okay. Any other concerns about this section? Okay, now we're on to page 112 or 113, section 332.020.0000, like we were just talking about, license issuance and renewal. So 1 is the same, 2 is the same. Notice there's no highlighting. And then we've added a new section 5 and 6, and that's down on the next page, 113, 114. So an LDM renewing their license must submit proof of passing. This is what Sammy brought our attention to just a few minutes ago, that we will make a point of keeping an eye on the wording there. And it sounds like this wording can actually stand, because each time it's going to be good for 3 years. So, and then an LDM must maintain documentation of that for 5 years. So don't throw it away, ever. All right. Any questions about this?
I have something, Semalia. It would make more sense to me, and this is something that is if we're thinking about the renewal of your Legend Drugs and Devices endorsement in a similar way to CPR and NRP and continuing ed, that it would be listed in the list of things at the beginning, as opposed to a different subsection where it says, number 2, to renew an LDM must A, submit a renewal application, B, submit that. And then it says attest to this, attest to that. Why wouldn't there be a then G that says submit proof of passing Legend Drugs and Devices? Makes more sense to me, because it's like those are all the things you have to do every single year when you renew your license. Because I understand that the Legend Drugs and Devices is every 3 years, but you have to show that you have it every year, just like you, even though CPR is every 2 years, every time you renew your license, you have to have an active CPR. So it makes more sense to me to put it there, but that's just.
Ooh, that is very streamlined and elegant. And then we would keep the
Right.
same section 6.
Yeah.
But it would just be a new G, submit proof of current exam or of passing the exam within the past 3 years.
This is
think it is-
Janelle. The question, oh,
Go ahead.
sorry. I was just gonna say, then would that then mean that we would be required to resubmit that document every year in that 3 years?
Correct.
Just like we do our CPR card or our newborn resuscitation card.
Well, we
every
only
time.
attest to it.
Yes,
You don't have to submit it, but
Can it say
everything is
attest?
online. Everything is online. It doesn't
Online.
feel hard to me. You just add the PDF.
If you,
We're midwives. We can do it. I believe in us.
I mean, if you're scanning the materials, then you can scan a copy of it.
It's my understanding that in order to renew online, you wouldn't be able to if you were submitting something for renewal. Is that right?
Derek?
That's why everything's a test. If you have to submit something, you can't renew online.
So when you have to submit so you never submit a new card for CPR? It's all attesting.
Unless you get audited.
Right, that's the whole point of a testing is you could get audited, but you've said that you have it, and if you get audited, you're gonna have that proof.
So how do people feel about having an attestation instead of providing proof? Especially given that HLO likes to have it done online. So submitting proof would be an additional thing in addition to, you couldn't do that online. Or you could, but I just heard you say, Sammy, that you couldn't really do it.
No, you wouldn't be able to renew online.
every 3 years.
This is Derek. If we make it a simple attestation when renewing online, then our staff would have the capability to start doing audits of these. And then that would make other licensed midwives aware that, hey, we are verifying this information. So that's one option.
Okay.
This would be included in the audit kind of packet.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely would need to be if we're only attesting. So what is people's comfort level with having it be, instead of 5A, have it be a new G, attest to having passed the exam within 3 years? Anybody concerned about that?
I think because it's in line with an established process and there's an understanding that if we're attesting, we need to have all of our documentation and be ready to submit it in an audit. That feels comfortable to me, particularly because choosing to require submission every year would mean that now LDMs cannot do online renewal at all, which seems like kind of a big deal.
This is Emilia. I just want clarity. HLO doesn't have the system doesn't have the capability for in a renewal for someone to submit documentation online. Is that what?
That's my understanding, correct.
Side note, not your guys' problem. That seems ridiculous.
I would 100% agree.
Like that's absurd. Like we should be submitting our CPR and NRP cards every time we renew our license. But I know that's not on you guys at all. I agree with what Andrea said. Like we're not here to police midwives. Midwives, if they want to lie about anything, they can do it at any given time. So I think an attestation is totally reasonable.
Well, actually,
Midwives do that.
HLO,
I don't think
the
midwives are
board
doing
is
that.
here to protect the public and make sure people are doing what they're supposed to. So, but an attestation is the way we're doing it for other things. And you could argue that being able to do neonatal resuscitation is pretty important. So, so yeah. All right. I'm not hearing anybody. Anybody have a blocking concern here that's waving their hand and we're just not seeing them? Speak now. So it sounds like we're going to have a new 3G that uses a test to having passed the Legend Drugs and Devices examination as described in blah, blah, blah within the last 3 years on a form prescribed.
It's Jen.
Now,
Just
wait
clear-
a second. Hold on. Because it's the form is being submitted by the proctor, but they're attesting every year. Okay. Gotcha. Jen, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to clarify. I think we're talking 2G and potentially and 3G.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, good clarification. Thank you. So in addition to attesting, when the exam happens, the proctor is submitting documentation to the state, to HLO. So there is a hard copy form that is there as well as the.
That was going to be my question. So that's still the proctor submits the form once it's complete. So there is record of it.
That's right.
So that makes even more sense to me that it's just an attestation on
right. Exactly.
So they submit it when you apply, but if we do this, they're not submitting anything now.
Well, every time they give the exam, we're asking the proctor to submit that certification page to the state, to you guys, every time they give an exam.
Into the old 5, but we removed old 5.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, sweetie.
I said we took away 5, so. Right?
Well, in the other section, though, it says, in the proctor section, it says when you give an exam, you have to turn the completed paperwork into the state. section is for the LDM renewal, not for the proctor. The proctor section already says that.
It's Jen. I don't know if you know this off the top of your head. Does the proctor section say that they have to submit regardless of pass or fail?
It actually doesn't say they have to submit under the proctor section. It just says who is qualified to be a proctor and what they have to do, like is one-on-one, have to exercise management and control, they have to document the skills, they have to maintain the skills exam documentation, they have to document a list. So it sounds like you need like a 10 that says must provide hello, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And it's somewhere, maybe it's on the form itself that it says they have to submit it to HLO.
Well, it was under renewal, but we took 5 and deleted it.
No, but I'm talking about the certification form. It says that they have to submit it to HLO, and that's not just for an
Applicant. It's under applicant and it was under renewal, but it isn't anywhere else, but I'll put it here.
Right,
Yep.
it's nowhere else in the rules. That's where it should go. And it's also on the certification form itself. Awesome. Good, but not too redundancy. That's good. Any other questions about this?
I
And
have a
maybe-
question around, this is Andrea, around whether there is any thought to how those submissions to the state and how the licensing renewal will be connected, or if they will be connected. It sounds like they will for issuing an initial license, but then if they are getting submitted, is there any thought to whether like that will be tracked, or will it be connected to someone's license in a system somewhere, or will it just be held as documentation for reference if needed?
That's an internal thing for OHLO. It's not a
Yeah.
rules thing,
Yeah.
first of all.
Internal question around systems. So probably a question for you, Sammy.
Probably not, more for Derek.
Well, if we're gonna allow the option for them to attest to having completed the exams when we're renewing online, our office would just simply do, an audit. And then we would make note on their internal file that yes, they're compliant, or no, they're not in compliance, and if they're not in compliance, then we go a step further.
Except, Eric, that we say on the form itself, and we talked about this, that anytime a proctor gives an exam, not just initial, but anytime they give an exam, we ask them to send that certification page to HLO. So Andrea's question is, what happens to that when they send it in? Does it go into that licensee's form or file somehow, or what happens to
So
it?
we would use that to verify initially if they've completed it, and if we audit someone, they don't have documentation provided from the proctor, then we reach out to them again saying, hey, you need to do this. But once we get the actual form, it would be connected to their profile, and basically we have like an online storage where all of their documents about a specific person would go. So there would be a record of it.
So when she retakes it 3 years later and her proctor sends that form to HLO again, it would again be scanned, or however you do it, into that licensee's file to be there if you needed it.
And there'd be a documented history of every piece of paper that's applied to that specific person, so.
Great, that's what I thought. Does that answer your question, Andrea?
Yes, thank you.
Good question, thank you. All right, so that was, we're making good progress, you guys, believe it or not. There's a lot left, but a lot of it doesn't apply to what we're doing. So now we've moved down to page 114, 115.
Restroom. So if you have any changes, make a mental note.
No changes.
Or we
What
could
time are
take,
we planning to break anyway?
I would say 10-minute break.
Right now? Okay, everybody all right with that?
Yes, please.
We are on page
115.
115.
So we just finished that page, correct?
115. Or the continuing education goal.
That's what we're on now. I think we're on 020010 continuing education, which would be page 114 or 115, depending. So the big change we made here was to ask people to complete their continuing education is 18 hours every year instead of 35 hours every 2 years. And so that's in section 1. And in section 2, to require only one of the 18 hours each year to be related to legend drugs and devices pharmacology. So you can see what was taken out was the administration of meds through injection, all of the other pieces, as well as the language about initial LD&D in section 3, old section 3 and old section 4. Talks about something we'll get to in a second. So if we could start with 1 and 2. Any questions about this idea of requiring continuing education every year, but fewer hours, including 1 hour each year of LD&D? Or do people want to keep it at the 35 hours with 1 hour of LD&D every 2 years? Sammy, can you remind me of why this change was proposed? Do you remember who proposed it?
Our continuing education person, because it makes it easier you just attest to it every year and.
That was my memory too, is that it came from the agency recommendation, not from the advisory committee. Yeah. And then I think I addressed earlier why we have to have at least 1 hour of LD&D related training, and we decided pharmacology covering the drugs was the easiest way to get 1 hour. Because
Can you remind me again why that is?
it's because in the statute, the Oregon legislature passed, the wording is such that it says that it doesn't give a specific number of hours, but it says that that you have to have continuing education in these topics as part of renewal, continuing education. So Sammy looked it up because I was like, let's get rid of this. And she's like, well, the statute says, and in order to change the statute, you have to go to the legislature.
No, thank you.
Would it be helpful if I'm going to volunteer you to do something, Sammy, because I don't have to do it. Would it be helpful to hear what the statute actually says? It isn't a specific number. It just says continuing education on legend drugs and devices. So
I just wanted to be reminded because I know people are going to ask me and I want to be able to give them I just needed in context the reminder of it. I don't need, I can look up the statute.
Yeah. It is out of our hands. We cannot eliminate it through rulemaking. It has to be through a statutory change.
Yep. This is Janelle. I have a question. I like the 18 every year because it just organizational for my brain. I like it. Does it have to then also be for the pharmacology requirement for that to be annually, or could that be every 3 years also? Just trying to think of how many pharmacology courses are out there for CEUs that you're not taking the same one over and over again.
Remember that you could be reading articles and doing self-education to meet this requirement.
Okay, I don't know how that's documented, so I'll have to look that up.
It's in another section.
Okay, I'll look it up later. We don't have to talk about it. I've just never done it that way, so that's good. That's great. That's fine.
It's Jen. I'm gonna jump in. That was my question, I guess, too, is this all attestation? Like you just tell people that you read an article? Because since we've established that there's no way to upload like a certificate from your continuing medical education?
You have to
fill
keep
out
it.
a form.
Yeah, you fill out a form. And then when they audit you, and I've been audited twice, so it happens because there's not that many of us and they do a percentage. So then you have to have that available. But it says, Online courses, workshops, organization, any board approved professional organization. It says on the new section 5 on page 115, 116. You can obtain through research, authorship, or teaching, provided that no more than half the required hours be in research, authorship, or teaching, and research would be considered potentially that. And then it doesn't say original research. And then in the next section 6, up to 10 hours of continuing education related to subject matter listed in subsection 1 of this rule may be completed through self-study that may include clinical service learning. Documentation substantiating the completion through self-study must be submitted on forms provided by the office. So if you do that, there are forms you fill out and you don't actually submit them, you keep them. And also I'm noticing that because we're doing it every year now, Sammy, that should say 5 hours instead of 10 hours.
That
on
was
the new
going to be my
section.
question, Holly, is that it still says 10 hours, so that would effectively double the amount of your CEU hours that could be self-study. So I
Right.
wondered if that was intentional.
Yeah, that was just a miss.
Ah, okay.
That's why we have a rack. So that you guys can catch all of the things. Do you see that, Sammy? And or Derek?
Yep.
Okay. And you get the form and it says must be submitted on forms. Do we actually submit it?
No, I don't know why it says that.
Yeah. So must be maintained or something on forms provided by, or must be documented on forms provided by, maybe would be good.
Okay.
Hold on, let me make a note on my draft here. Documented. All right, going back to the beginning of that section though, and that was a great question, Jen. Thank you so much. Any other comments about making it every year and then 18 hours a year, including 1 hour of LD&D? And the standing question was, could we make it less than every time that we need the 1 hour of pharmacology related stuff? And the reason that it says pharmacology, and I did have input on this, is it seemed like it's very hard to get continuing education type information on meds by injection per se. It hasn't changed that much. Or even, I mean, there's a little bit new on advanced treatment of shock, by which we mean IV and, that kind of thing, but it's very minimal. IV therapy in terms of what we do and suturing, it's a lot of the same. So it's hard to get new information, continuing education. But one of the questions that we had is, do we want to keep it to where it can be from any LD&D topic, or do we want it to just say pharmacology covering drugs? Thoughts?
I think keeping it broad, this is Willa. I agree. It benefits us all because then we have more options of sources we can pull from to read.
So you're suggesting that we not strike out A, B, C, D, and E?
No, I think striking it out is okay, but just the overriding word of pharmacology covering drugs listed is really wording. I mean, that's simple enough to where we're not backing ourselves into a corner.
Mm-hmm.
But it just leaves it broad. And then we have because I mean, there's not going to be, well, I mean, we all hope there's always groundbreaking scientific new research to study, but that doesn't happen all the time. And so in those in-between years when nothing new is happening or has been released, it gives us some more option of what to read and something that might actually interest us.
Right now, you could read new things about TXA, whether it's good for postpartum hemorrhage or not, and be good for the next 5 years. So just on TXA. So yeah, I think you're right. Any other thoughts about whether we should keep A through E or whether it's good the way it's worded now? Going once. Going twice. All right, no other thoughts on that then. We're amazingly close to done, you guys, with this. So I know it feels like it's been a gruel, but it's actually, sometimes these racks go for like 12 hours. So we're actually doing pretty well. So if you scroll down page 115 or 116, the new section 3 that's in yellow, this is talking about the it's making the changes necessary to adjust the fact that if you attend fewer than 5 births a year, you're required to do more continuing ed. And so right now, the way this is worded, if in the previous renewal year, you have to have completed an additional 10 hours of a continuing education during the next renewal cycle. So if I only do 2 births this year and I go to renew, then the next year to renew, I have to do more continuing ed. In addition to the 18 hours that we're now requiring. And it actually gives an example there in section C. And some of this wording was just, we updated the dates and gives you an example. Any questions about this? It's actually quite a bit more, as somebody who hasn't been a primary midwife for quite a while, does consulting and stuff and attends birth, but not as the primary, this can add up to a lot of continuing education. So it's not nothing. And then there's a lot of renumbering through the rest of the section. And then if you go down to new 9, which is on page 117, 118, I believe. Yes. The new section 9 just says the requirements listed in subsection 7 above don't apply if you are retired, not practicing in the state, or blah, blah, blah. So it's just a little more clarifying wording. And then lots of renumbering until you get to the very bottom. And then we have struck the stuff about can't use the requirements to become licensed as part of your continuing education requirements like your LD&D, and the curriculum objectives are available and you may have to pay a fee because everything's available, going to be available online. That's been struck. Any questions? And Sammy, if I'm misspeaking here, please yell real loud. So, any questions or concerns or? Okay, and then we don't have anything new at all until we get down to page 121. And this is once again trying to tidy up the nursery here. It's eliminating the part that talks about that an LDM is prohibited from purchasing until you get the education. Well, of course, you can't renew until you have the documentation. So we took that out so it's not confusing. And we also took out too, the person who completes the continuing education is authorized to purchase. No, if you're an LDM and you've been renewed, you are authorized. No longer can you be an LDM without having this competency-based assessment completed. So we're getting rid of stuff that's from the good old days that we have now outgrown. Any questions about that? And then a bunch of renumbering down until on page 122/123, old number 7 is being eliminated. Back when we added GBS, prophylactic antibiotics IV, we added this section that says that to obtain this, you are required to obtain this training, even if you're not planning to administer it. We just took that whole section out. An LDM isn't required to administer any of these things legally. There might be professional reasons and, other reasons why you might want to do things, but none of the drugs in our formulary, nobody is ever in their licensing or reg says you must do this at this time. That's for different kinds of authorizations and standards and things. So we took that out. Any questions about that? Then we have the lists of the drugs and stuff. And the one thing I thought that we might want to think about, this is not directly related to, well, it is related to LD&D because it's approved devices and they're legend devices, is on page, and Sammy, this is going to be new to you, so I apologize. On page 126, we list, and maybe it's not needed, but it says devices for maternal and neonatal resuscitation, including, and it doesn't have anything about LMAs. Do we want to, that has become kind of standard of care. Or we could put airway management tools or something like that, like airway management devices.
Or adjunct airway.
Adjunct airway.
I think we should add that because it is what is recommended and is becoming the standard. And
right, that's another shift. So Sammy, it would be under that page 0260030 3D. And what was the wording you used again? Airway.
I said
adjunct?
airway adjunct.
Yeah. What do you think, Greg? Are you still with us?
Absolutely. I think the introduction of LMA, it's the standard, and I think it's I've placed several of them. They're easy blind sticks, and they're just a great way to obtain an airway when you're not an anesthesiologist and have practice all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And Greg, does the term airway adjunct exclude intubation?
Adjuncts, typically we use those just for the placement of like nasopharyngeal airways, or oral airways. Yeah.
Great. I thought that would be an okay term that we're not using like because we don't want to say LMA because that sometimes is because there's also iGel.
Sure.
But, yeah.
Right. Right. So Sammy, airway, I believe, is one word, and then adjunct, ADJUNCT.
Got it.
Okay, and that if we continue on past that page, so we're now down to 127 or 128. We're talking about fees here. And if you notice, 2B, written examination, not just examination, but written examination on legend drugs and devices will be $50. We used to have another examination that was, don't even need to go there. And then we took out, this was a staff suggestion, reactivation of license $150 because you just have to pay your past fees. So there's not an additional $150, but you do pay a delinquency fee for when you were inactive. And then duplicate licensing document is $25 because they don't send copies anymore. They just provide you with a scan of it. It's just $25 to cover staff time. Affidavit of licensure or credential, which could include the documentation for the LD&D, would be $50, no increase. And then the old sections 3 and 4 are being eliminated. At one point, there was reduction in licensing fees and then resumption of licensing fees, and all that is ancient history and it's all gone now. And so we're removing those sections. And that is it specifically for the rules. So one of the things I wanted to say before I hopefully don't have to say very much more at all is that Derek and especially Sammy, well, especially Derek too, have worked a lot and hard on this with a lot of other things going on, including the loss of Cerinthia Murphy, who passed away about a year ago now. Feels like a huge loss, who worked a lot on this. And so I want to make sure she gets a shout out posthumously, may she rest in peace, but also to acknowledge how hard it is to pick up a project that you have had nothing to do with, because neither Derek nor Sammy was managing this project. The other person who was managing it left for a different position. And so they both had to figure out what was going on and pick this up and clarify things and have meetings and find things on computers and in back files and stuff, like a ton of work, which did slow this down a little bit, but was absolutely essential. And they did a great job with a lot of grace, and really, I'm super appreciative of how hard they worked on this, and it is not their fault. Plus, the other point I wanted to make is we have a new board that was given to them to oversee, which is American Sign Language Board, that the legislature in its wisdom decided to create a new board, which had to be prioritized and shoved almost everything else out of the way, including us. So that's the other reason why this was slower than we'd hoped it would be. But now we have momentum and we have been moved to the front of the line. So just that little bit of acknowledgement and insight into this project and where we are now. So that's what I have to say and share with you today, unless there are other questions and other things. I'm sure there are other things we need to do, but that's what I know about stuff.
Thank you, Holly. Appreciate that.
No, I appreciate all you've done.
So I don't think we're gonna need another meeting, but I do want to go over what the fiscal impact will be for licensees, the public, other state agencies, and small business. Some of it, I think, is obvious. Licensees are gonna have $50 fee for a written exam. That seems obvious. HLO is going to have an impact because we're gonna have to create forms, put stuff on the web, reach out to proctors, all like that, all these things. Some of those things are obvious. Are there things that would not be as obvious to administrative staff? Like the time, I mean, I'm assuming, well, I don't know. So currently, when people are training to be a midwife, they're learning this stuff as they go. So that's already happening.
Mhm.
This is just saying, these are the competencies that you need to make sure you have. Yeah, so I don't think that's new. But the time they'll have to take to do the exam and all those and the additional exams every 3 years, and keeping documentation of those exams for the proctor and for the examinee. Anything
And
else?
potential travel
Travel.
for the exam to where the potentially, it may not be, but
Yeah, those were the two things I was thinking of is if folks have to travel to complete the requirements, especially if they're in a rural or remote area, that could be a challenge. And the other thought that I have is just not yet knowing how available proctors will be and whether or not it will be common for that to be expensive or affordable or what that arrangement will be. Means it's hard to be able to answer that question with a lot of confidence because it's a new system.
So how it works for our other programs that have proctors, well, they're like electrology, basically put the word out with a letter and say, are you interested in being a proctor? People submit the application. Do they submit the application individually or with a licensee? No.
Usually individual.
Individually, yeah. And then if you meet the requirements, then you go and there is one thing we're not totally sure about is usually they're a licensee, but in this situation, we'll have people that are not licensees. So we're still figuring out how that will work. But we usually publish a list of the proctors. So I don't know if everybody's gonna want to be on that published list, so we could ask a question on the application, do you want this to be published, and a check mark? I mean,
I think it's already on there, actually.
in a way, so. Yeah, so that's how it will work, as long as you meet the requirements, you submit the form, you go on the list, and they'll be on the web.
What's unknown is whether a preceptor, how much they're going to charge, whether, if they're coming to you, or even if they're not, how are they going to get the materials, the testing materials that are needed? And there's an expense on the testing materials, which the student would probably have to cover. The foam block and the suture packets and would have to provide for the test, for the skills tests. So expenses related to skills testing, it just depends on what they have and what they know. For me, I usually do the testing for free, but they have to pay for the materials unless they're taking a course, obviously, and then they're paying for the whole kit and caboodle. But if I'm having to buy new testing arms or something, then I may have to charge something to each student to help defray that cost. So it's really hard to say what the cost is going to be. But my guess, assuming we're not doing this to, become wealthy beyond our avarice, is somewhere for travel and or expenses related to testing, $100 to $200 if you need a dollar amount. And it could be less and it could be more, but that's a good neighborhood. Do you need a
Don't have
dollar
to
amount?
No. We
Don't need a
both.
dollar amount. So
Well, we
just
did-
expenses related to the skills testing then.
Yeah, and I'll give some examples, phone block, and I'll get with you on what those materials might look like, more of them. And I can give a range, 0.
Great.
For free, and some you may charge $200. So it's just so people are aware that this could be a fiscal impact, either negatively or positive.
Mhm.
Not like,
We really designed it to have minimal financial and logistical impact and to make it very accessible. So that's good, I think.
and then. We also need to have, since sometimes a hard question to answer, a racial equity statement. Sometimes it's easier, like when we do practice standards, like we did for, I can't even remember what we're doing it for now. Anyway, I can't remember what it was. So the questions are this. Identify what persons or racial groups are impacted by the rule. Oftentimes in licensing, it's everybody's included. There's no, so I think in this situation, it's going to be that answer that
Mhm.
everyone asks the same thing, so. If you want to get a license, you gotta take the test. You want to renew, you gotta take the test, so. I think that would be the answer. All the things that I had. And then the next item is public comment. Meeting agenda. Any public comment? Anybody? Chrissy? No. I'm gonna read. Is there anything else anyone wants to talk about?
We talked about, and this might be part of your impact, the impact of non-English speakers and how that's going to be addressed. So you might want to just mention to them what we talked about that in terms of translators.
Yes, what did we talk about? So if they're taking it on a work day, a written exam, they're taking it somewhere else, so they can definitely have an interpreter. They can have an interpreter at HLO if they take a test, or they can have an interpreter, they're taking it at home. And then obviously a proctor can bring in an interpreter if necessary. So there's not a limitation there, but I will definitely put that in there. And at some point, I don't know if our new computer systems will translate the exams automatically. I doubt it, but I hope, I'm hopeful.
If only. If only. That's a dream. Derek, are you feeling like good about that we've gotten done what you need? Are you thinking we've met all of your needs to get this done?
Yeah, I think so. So for me, the next step is just making sure we get it all up and ready to go on Workday. It will be the online platform that they can take the exam on.
So my understanding is that this RAC's work is done, do we send copies out to the RAC so they see the changes, or do they have any more obligations as RAC members from this after we're done with this meeting? What is the deal for them?
You're off the hook once this meeting's over.
Yay, off the hook. Then it goes to the board for them to review one more time. And then including the proposed rules. And then my understanding is it goes to public meetings and feedback period. Is that correct?
Yes, let's see, I'm giving you some dates here.
I know it has January 2027 is an implementation date in the rules, but boy, would I love it for it to be implemented way before then.
Yeah, so that was extending out needing, thinking we were gonna need 3 rules advisory committees. So here's what I'm thinking is at the January 22nd for.
Mainly because we don't really have many options for people needing original training.
At the January 22nd board meeting, I can have, it's supposed to be just an enforcement meeting, but I can add to the agenda of approving proposed rules.
Great.
And so maybe I can get a final by February. Hold on. They could adopt rules April 16th. And they could be in effect May 1st.
Boy, am I happy to hear that.
Maybe we'll just have to make sure, I mean, obviously there's, well, we have it on workday, we have access, so there'll be some, we might have
Logistical.
a running start kind of thing, maybe it won't actually be implemented till July 1, I don't know for sure, but May 1st feels, part of the problem is when you do rulemaking, is we do a proposal, right? So that's what this is, and the boards and look at the proposal, and they're gonna go, okay, we like this. And we put out to public comment, and then people go, I hate it, I love it, and here's all these other things. And so during this interim, which is the time we wanna start preparing, we can kind of prepare, but not really prepare because things can change. And
Right.
any changes stuff is this point. Just gonna say it out loud. Often things change, so sometimes once it's implemented, we need another month or 2 to actually get proctor stuff going out and all these things, because it could change in between that little 60-day window. Hopefully that won't be the case, and we'll be able to like start saying like, hey, this is coming, maybe not with the specifics, but that be ready, So, yeah, but I think May 1st is, I think, doable.
Awesome. Andrea and Emilia, would it be helpful for there to be a presentation about proposed rules and that affect LD&D and continuing education through OMC as maybe a special little virtual thing? And I'm happy to participate in that and do that so people know what there is to comment on and maybe calm people down.
Yes.
Before.
That's what my hand is up. I have a couple things around that. My first is the more information that we can give midwives ahead of time from asking for their feedback, the better for everyone. And so that, yes, I would love, and Holly, you and Andrea and I can talk about what that might look like, doing something that's very specific around that. I also am just thinking about the logistical side of things, because often comes back to OMC for the majority of midwives. So then they're going to come back and be like, all right, so now there's all these people that need their renewal, and who are the proctors and where are they and all of that. And so I know we don't have to do this right now, but I would, I beg of you, let's not get to the place where we're like, and it's happening without a plan for it to be accessible, because it's all well and great to have it be this new plan that I think I'm 100% supportive of. But then what will happen is like no one can get it. And then that just sends everyone into a frenzy, and it's just like a whole mess. And so I know that we're in the loop, and so I'm just, as we get closer to launching it, like
there's no reason we can't have 5 proctor, like I can be a proctor, Willer can be a proctor, Andrea can be like we can have people ready to go that are willing to be like, here it is, and here are 5 people that are already set to go, with all the materials and all, like, and we could, I'm happy to do like figure out a training session that OMC can put on for people who want to be proctors so they know how to do it. So it can just be successful and smooth when it rolls out, because what just happens is we start it and then we figure it out as we go, and then it's just not. So
Well,
that's my plea.
I think that with that being said, what happens is we go for the soonest date possible and we say implement, but like all those things I just said, well, this could change and this might change and this goes here. So, you know, I could file them May 1st, but maybe they don't become effective until June 1st, June 15th. Like, give us a 45-day window to get proctors on board and this and that, something. So we could talk about that offline on how that rolls out, which I think I told the board that we would work on that.
Great.
How it will work. But yeah, good point.
Thanks.
Other thoughts or questions before we're done in a mere 3 hours and 21 minutes by the time we're done, which is like a world record?
I have a recruitment request. This is Chrissy. I will have an open position on the DEM board for a certified nurse midwife. So if any of you are interested and meet that qualification, please reach out to me and I will send you an application link.
Thanks, Chrissy.
Would you, hi, it's Jen. Would you send it to me? Because I have a lot of certified nurse midwife colleagues who could be interested.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah. Do you, I guess Sammy probably has my info, or how are we going to network?
Yeah. I'll give it to her. She's got access.
Cool,
She's
cool.
got everything. Yeah, I didn't actually get an applicant for a CNN on this rack. So there you go.
Oh,
We tried.
Good try.
I'll exert some peer pressure.
I think we have a good group. This is great input. Things that we should have discussed were discussed that I didn't even realize needed to be discussed. So this is absolutely awesome. And if you do think of anything else, because I know you're going to go home and reread everything with a microscope, right? To make sure. If it were me, I'd put it in my file. But if you do think of something, it hits you, please reach out to Sammy or to me, and because Sammy and I and Derek will be meeting probably fairly soon to get this moving so it's ready for the board meeting in late January, and we all don't want to have to work over Christmas. So
Right. Let me just make a little public comment statement so it's on the record, even though there's no one here.
Okay.
At this time, the Board of Prevention Midwifery Rules Advisory Committee will hear public and interested parties' feedback. Is there anybody who would like to make public comment? Hearing none. This meeting is adjourned at 12:21 p.m. Thank you everyone so much. And I will send out a PDF of what we come up with for the final before it goes to the board. And you guys can at least have it so you can see it. And then you guys will be kept up with like when the hearing is and all that stuff. Thank you, everyone. Thank